All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back for another deep dive. And wow, have we got a deep dive for you today? You guys sent in some seriously cool stuff about Kurt Cobain.
Okay.
And clearly you want to go deeper than just the basic Nirvana story.
Absolutely.
So we're going to unpack how this kid from Aberdeen, Washington, starts off with like a $5 pawn shop guitar
Right.
and ends up, well, a rock icon.
It really is remarkable, And what's always intrigued me is this push and pull throughout his whole career.
Yeah.
That tension between his DIY punk roots, almost like an anti-fame thing.
Right.
Yet the music he made just resonated globally.
Yeah, like he became huge kind of by accident, never really knew
Right.
what to do with it, huh? So let's go back to the beginning. We know Cobain was largely self-taught, right?
Yeah.
But for someone who reached that level of songwriting influence, isn't that kind of rare?
It's so rare. Most musicians, even in genres like punk, where rawness is valued, at least they dabble in some formal training.
Yeah.
But Cobain really struggled with it, He even found like standard music theory confusing.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because this kind of became his strength. He wasn't held back by like the right way to play.
So instead of fighting that, he just kind of leaned into it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He embraced power chords, distortion, and he would use alternative tunings
Oh, yeah.
to get the sound he was hearing in his head.
Right.
A perfect example is Smells Like Teen Spirit, that riff.
Oh, iconic.
Uses drop D tuning, but with a twist.
Now, for anyone who's like not a guitar nerd, drop D basically. It makes that lowest string of the guitar like heavier, more open to like those droney kind of riffs, which, very Cobain.
Yeah.
But there was more to it than that, right?
There was. He didn't just take drop D and go with it.
Right.
He modified it further to E, B, G, C, F, A.
Right.
And that gave it an even heavier, more resonant quality. That unmistakable grunge edge.
It's so true.
And it really sums up Cobain's approach. Break the rules, experiment,
Right.
find the sound that matches that intensity of what he's feeling.
And it's kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
This musical revolutionary, this innovator, started with, like we said, a $5 pawn shop acoustic. Was it really that bad, or is that, like, part of the myth?
I think it really says a lot about his drive.
Yeah.
He wasn't sitting around waiting for, like, the perfect gear or a famous teacher.
Right.
He was making music with what he had.
Yeah.
And that hunger to create, you'd see it through his whole career. But it wasn't just punk that was driving him. He had this surprising range of influences.
Well, yeah, and the Beatles thing always throws me.
Right.
Like, how does the poster boy of grunge
Yeah.
get inspired by, the Fab Four?
Well, Cobain loved their experimental side.
Mm.
Albums like Speed Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, where they were just like blending genres fearlessly.
Mm.
You can hear echoes of that in Nirvana. It's not just straight grunge. There's like pop sensibilities in there,
Oh, yeah.
which is pretty wild for, a band coming out of punk.
But wasn't embracing pop, like the Beatles did, kind of against the rules of punk?
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about Cobain.
Yeah.
He was taking inspiration from everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Led Zeppelin, their powerful riffs, Black Sabbath's sludgy sound. Now, when we say sludgy, we're talking about that thick, distorted sound, like the guitars are like wading through mud.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Like the heavy, distorted riffs in Territorial Pissing, something like that.
Yes, exact.
And of course, you can't talk Cobain without mentioning, the punk bands.
Of course.
The Sex Pistols, the Ramones.
Absolutely. They provided like the blueprint for Nirvana's raw energy, that stripped down aesthetic, and just that anti-establishment attitude.
Right.
But there's this lesser known band, the Wipers, that were massively influential on Nirvana's early sound.
Interesting.
Their music was abrasive, guitar-driven, and with these really emotionally charged lyrics.
Mm.
And that really resonated with Cobain.
Yeah.
Especially on their first album, Bleach.
Speaking of places, that brings us to Seattle, right?
Yeah.
The heart of grunge. And we know the Melvins were a big part of that scene. They even mentored Cobain early on.
Yeah, the Melvins were huge.
Yeah.
Their guitarist, Buzz Osborne, was actually friends with Cobain, kind of a mentor early on.
Right.
And their music was so different from everything else going on.
Yeah.
They combined this heaviness of metal with that raw energy of punk, which, really spoke to Cobain.
Yeah.
And they kind of showed him that you could be heavy, abrasive, but without losing that emotional honesty and DIY ethos of punk.
So we're starting to see these, seemingly random pieces kind of coming together here.
Yeah.
Right. A self-taught guitarist drawing from punk, metal, even pop, all while being mentored by this heavy, almost avant-garde band.
Yeah.
But before Nirvana, took off, there was Fecal Matter.
Right.
This early band of Cobain's, were they basically just like a rough draft of Nirvana?
Think of them as Cobain's musical laboratory, almost. The music was raw, chaotic, but bassist Chris Novoselic, he heard their demo.
Right.
And was blown away. That's what ultimately led to them forming Nirvana.
Oh, wow.
And it shows, even in Cobain's songwriting, there was something special there.
So, like, the seeds of Smells Like Teen Spirit and all these iconic songs, they were already kind of there.
Absolutely. Tracks like Spank Through, Downer, they give you a glimpse of Cobain's raw talent, like the angst, the vulnerability, and that blend of, like, aggression and melody. It was all there. Yeah. He was finding his voice, even if the recording, it was rough.
And let's be real, the lyrics, they're such a huge part of Nirvana's impact.
Oh, yeah.
Cobain's words, they connected with an entire generation.
Yeah.
It was more than just the music. It felt like he was, like, speaking for people who felt unseen.
It's true. His lyrics were deeply personal, often reflecting his own struggles, his feelings of alienation.
Right.
But they resonated with millions because he wasn't afraid to be unfiltered raw. Like, he exposed his vulnerabilities. And by doing that, he gave a voice to, a whole generation's anxieties. Like, he tapped into this collective unconscious, putting words to all those unspoken feelings of angst and disillusionment.
Right. Yeah, that so many young people were going through. And he did it with this disarming simplicity. I read somewhere that Come As You Are was written in, like, just a few hours.
Wow.
And he, like, finalized the lyrics right before they recorded it. It's crazy how an anthem like that could come together, like, so spontaneously.
It really shows his songwriting process in action, capturing that rawness, that unpolished emotion, pure punk rock ethos.
It makes you think, what if he had gone down that, like, traditional music theory road?
Yeah.
Would we have gotten those songs? I mean, would they have hit the same way?
Fascinating question. Maybe those rules, that structure, would have stifled that energy, that honesty that makes his music so powerful.
And that DIY thing, it was in everything Nirvana did, right?
Yeah, totally.
Not just the music. It was like their look, the album art, the videos.
Yeah.
They rejected that whole, like, slick corporate rock star image.
Think about those early Nirvana videos.
Oh, yeah.
Gritty, low budget, almost like home movies.
Yeah.
Total opposite of those, like super polished MTV videos everyone was making.
Yeah, like they snuck into the mainstream with a handheld camera and a bad attitude.
Exactly. A deliberate choice, like a visual representation of their sound, their ethos. It was like a giant middle finger to all that overproduced artificial pop culture that was everywhere back then.
It's wild how they blew up yet stayed true to those underground roots.
Right. It's like they became huge by accident, but never really bought into the rock star game.
That's the beauty of it, never compromised their artistic vision. Even when they were, superstars, they stuck to their principles, that punk rock DIY thing.
Yeah.
And that's what connected with millions of people, hungry for something real, something authentic.
Let's talk about Cobain's guitar playing for a sec. He wasn't a shredder in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
But his style was so distinct, so powerful. How'd he do that?
For him, it was all about emotion, channeling raw emotion into sound. He wasn't concerned with, like, technical skill.
Right.
He wanted to create a soundscape that matched his lyrics.
Yeah.
Visceral, almost like he was attacking the guitar, trying to, like, wring out every feeling.
And those alternative tunings, they were huge in creating that sound, right?
Huge. Like, he discovered a new way to make the guitar speak.
Yeah.
He'd use those tunings, like that modified drop D we talked about.
To get heavier, more dissonant tones.
Yeah.
Bending the notes in ways you couldn't with standard tuning. Another way to break free from, like, the rules of playing. Yeah. And find new expression.
Can't forget the power chords, too.
Oh, the foundation of so many Nirvana songs.
Right.
Power chords were his weapon of choice. Those heavy, distorted chords.
Yeah.
They hit you right in the gut. Simple, raw, incredibly effective.
It was amazing.
This wall of sound. Aggressive but melodic, too.
It's fascinating, those simple chords.
Yeah.
But then, combined with those tunings, that almost reckless way he played, it created something so powerful, unforgettable.
It's like a testament to his pure musical instinct. He took those basic things, and turned them into something extraordinary.
Yeah.
He understood the power of keeping things simple.
Stripping it back.
Getting to the core.
It wasn't just the separate pieces, though, right?
Right.
It was the way he brought them together.
Yeah.
The tunings, the power chords, the distortion, the way he layered the guitars.
The dynamics.
Building that tension and release.
Exactly. It's like he was making sonic sculptures, these raw, jagged pieces reflecting his inner world.
It wasn't just noise.
No, it was carefully crafted, arranged with intention. Even with all the rawness, he had this intuitive sense of dynamics, building a song, creating those quiet moments that would explode into these like cathartic bursts of energy.
It's like he was always pushing, experimenting, looking for new ways to express those raw emotions.
And that's a big part of what makes his music so timeless. It's not tied to any era or trend. It's pure human experience. The pain, the joy, the confusion.
Of just being alive.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, if he had had that formal training, would it have helped him or held him back?
Hard to say.
Yeah.
Maybe the rules would have stifled him.
Right.
Or maybe would have given him more tools.
Right.
Who knows? One of those what ifs we'll never know the answer to.
But you can't deny that self-taught approach, it definitely shaped his sound.
Totally.
Yeah.
Not bound by those ideas of what a guitar should sound like, a song should be. He could create his own rules.
Yeah.
Forge his own path.
Well, we've talked a lot about, punk, metal influences, even that Beatles connection. But what about those less obvious influences, right? The artists you wouldn't immediately link to Nirvana.
Oh, for sure. Cobain was a true music lover. Always digging for new sounds.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid to pill from unexpected places.
Right.
He was a big fan of indie rock, bands like the Vaselines, Daniel Johnston.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He loved their rawness, their honesty, the lo-fi aesthetic.
Yeah.
That willingness to be vulnerable, unpolished.
You can hear that in some of Nirvana's, quieter, more introspective stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cobain wasn't just about noise and aggression. He had this sensitive side, this vulnerability that he wasn't afraid to show. He understood contrast, balancing the loud with the soft, abrasive with the melodic.
Right.
Gave his music so much depth.
So like his music was this tapestry, right? Woven from all these threads, punk, metal, pop, indie rock, plus his own experiences, his perspective.
It reminds us that great artists, they're always changing, always searching, pushing themselves.
Right.
And Cobain's journey, it took him from that $5 pawn shop guitar to, global fame.
Right.
All while wrestling with these inner conflicts, these opposing forces.
It's pretty remarkable.
It is a story of talent, passion, the power of being yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. One thing that always gets me thinking is how Cobain dealt with that clash between his like DIY punk roots and then the massive success that Nirvana had.
Right.
It's this paradox that's kind of like right at the core of his story.
Yeah, it's like he was stuck in this whirlwind of his own making, right? On one hand, you've got the anti-establishment, almost like anti-fame stance.
Right.
But then he's writing music that's like connecting with millions of people around the world. How do you like reconcile those two things?
It's a tension you can like hear in the music, see in interviews, even just feel in how he carried himself.
Yeah.
There's this constant push and pull, wanting to stay true to those underground ideals.
Right.
But then also dealing with, suddenly being the spotlight.
And he wasn't afraid to like tackle that conflict in his lyrics, right?
No, not at all.
I mean, songs like Smells Like Teen Spirit, In Bloom, they became anthems for anyone who felt like an outsider, anyone who just like rejected the mainstream, even if that mainstream was, starting to embrace him.
Exactly. He gave a voice to this whole generation that felt alienated, misunderstood, just disillusioned with everything.
Right.
And he did it with this incredible intensity, this honesty that was both like freeing, but also probably kind of scary at times.
It's almost like the bigger he got, the more he pushed back. You
Yeah.
know, like he was trying to tear down the idea of what it even meant to be a rock star,
Right.
all while becoming one of the biggest on the planet.
There's this almost self-sabotaging side to it.
Yeah.
This need to like break down those walls he built, reject all the expectations. You hear it in the music, the rawness, the aggression, even just the noise. It's all part of this desperate attempt to hold on to that authenticity, that artistic integrity.
Even when you're selling millions of records,
Just
like
okay.
he was trying to balance those two sides, you know?
Yeah.
The
Yep.
punk rock idealist who wants to like smash the system.
Right.
But also, he's this reluctant rock star dealing with what happens when you actually make it big.
It's a tough spot to be in.
I wonder if he ever felt like he was betraying, where he came from.
It's something we can only guess at, but the struggle was real.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, what makes his music so powerful, so lasting. It's not just songs. It's like a reflection of a real human struggle
Right.
that I think a lot of us connect with, whether we're musicians or not.
Yeah.
We all have those times when we feel pulled in different directions, trying to figure out who we are, where we fit in.
It's a good reminder that success doesn't mean you're happy.
No,
And fame, well, it can cut both ways.
for sure.
And sometimes the most profound art comes from that struggle, from wrestling with those,
Yeah.
inner demons.
Cobain's music definitely shows that.
That felt-
Tells us it's okay to feel conflicted, lost, to rage against the machine.
Yeah.
Reminds us that even in the dark times, there's beauty in just letting those emotions out, raw and unfiltered.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Kurt Cobain's music,
Yeah.
I'm left with this feeling of awe,
Mm-hmm.
gratitude for the music he made, for giving a voice to those who didn't have one.
I'm left wondering, what if? What other sounds he might have explored if he'd had more time?
Sadly, we'll never know.
We won't.
But what he did in the time he had is amazing.
It is.
He left his mark, a legacy that's still inspiring, still makes us think,
Yeah,
even all these years later. And that's pretty special.
it really is. And for everyone listening, go back and listen to his music again.
Yeah.
Really listen. Explore how deep and complex it is. And ask yourself, what if Kurt Cobain hadn't had to deal with all that fame? Would his creativity have burned even brighter, or would it have faded? Maybe we'll never know for sure, but it's something to think about as you explore the music of this icon.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.